Welcome to the Million Pound Mission Podcast. I'm your host, Adam Shively, the PhD, the previously heavy dude, and I'm on a 1 million pound mission. I've personally lost over 100 pounds. I've helped my hometown lose over 35,000 pounds, and now I'm on a mission to produce over 1 million pounds of results by helping you gain clarity about what you need to do to reach your goals and give you the confidence to take action. And my friends, the perfect time to start taking action is now. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Million Pound Mission Podcast. It's your buddy Adam, the PhD, the previously heavy dude, and this is episode number 206, Overcoming Emotional Eating with my friend Nicola Beer. Now, before we dive into that, I want to give you a gift. It's a free download of my number one tool that I use with all of my paying clients. I'm giving it to you for free. It's my Transformation Battle Plan Workbook. Now, most people, they don't need a better diet or a better fitness routine. They need a better game plan. And it's time to reclaim control over your health by downloading your free copy of my Transformation Battle Plan Workbook. This is a game changer, all right? And I know that sometimes we don't see that value because I'm giving it away for free, but I guarantee you, you take this next step, you go to millionpoundmission.com, you download the Transformation Battle Plan Workbook and set up your 28-day battle plan, and you are going to see some momentum occur in your transformation. I guarantee it. So go to millionpoundmission.com, download that, and get that momentum cranking. All right, now, let's talk about episode 206. Now, this is a deep topic, right? And we're going to go deep on it. Emotional eating is one of the biggest transformation danger zones that is out there, all right? And I'm tagging in my friend Nicola Beer to help us learn more about this topic and how we can actually overcome it. Now, Nicola, who is just a lovely person, she's super awesome. She's a world-renowned expert in relationship psychology and transformation. She's been able to help thousands of men and women across the globe to live love-filled and vibrant lives through healing relationships and childhood trauma, as well as the relationship to food. Now, in addition to co-authoring 4 international best-selling books, she's also been featured on ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, Huffington Post, and Wall Street Select. So she's out there. She's helping people. She's got an amazing voice, an amazing, lovely accent, and we connected all the way. She's living currently in Dubai. So you notice the sound quality is a little bit different. It's not necessarily bad. It's just a little bit different than the average because we are going across the globe via the internets, and that always gets tricky. So in this episode, Nicola and I, we dive deep on her own difficult journey around her relationship with food. We talk about how to determine if we are an emotional eater and how that might be different than having a food addiction. We discuss the important steps to take to heal the root causes of our emotional eating. And then we even talk about how we can help support our children in developing a healthy relationship with food. I really love this interview. Nicola is awesome. You're going to get high value out of this. Just sit tight, plug in those earbuds, and let's enjoy episode number 206, Overcoming Emotional Eating with Nicola Beer. All right, Nicola, welcome to the Million Pound Mission Podcast. How are we doing today, my friend?
I'm excellent, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, dialing in all the way from Dubai. This is a first for the podcast, so very excited to connect. And you are somebody that I've grown to be a quick fan of because I knew instantly when I got your information put in front of me, I was like, her info is really going to be able to help my audience. She must come on the show. And so I'm glad that we're making this happen. Now, I kind of want to, you have had a really interesting relationship with food. You've traveled a long journey with that relationship with food. So I kind of wanted to start there and have you tell us a little bit about how that perspective on food, how your relationship with food and eating has changed over the years and how you've gotten to the point where you're at right now.
Sure, absolutely. So my relationship with food really started in my childhood. I grew up, my mum had 5 children, so I'm one of 5, and she was very stressed and she was physically and emotionally abusive. And I took this as a sign of there's something wrong with me. My self-esteem was low. And I started to use food, and I realized I could use food to sort of cope and to stuff these emotions. So as early as I can remember, I remember running down the stairs and filling my school jumper with lots of sweets and cakes, and then running back upstairs and eating it all. And then I went through other times when my parents, they got divorced when I was 13, and my dad went, and my mum, bless her, she was finding it even harder to cope. I then started to use food to sometimes not eat as a punishment, and then as a reward eating. So from a very early age, my eating was kind of messed up. And then when I was 14, I remember going round to one of my friends' sleepovers for her birthday. So it was girls sleeping over and watching movies and eating ice cream. And this girl handed us all a laxative, and they were talking about being sick. And then I thought, wow, this is great. This means that I can just literally eat whatever I want. And obviously it was just an absolute disaster. And then from then on, I was overeating throughout my college years. And then in my first year of university, I met a girl who was lovely, and she liked to spend hours and hours getting ready in front of the mirror, and I couldn't think of doing anything worse. Give me 10 minutes and then, I'm done. But she liked doing this whole 3-hour ritual going out, and she could see that how much I was really struggling to look at myself in the mirror and feel happy going out. And it was then that she said, I was 19 at the time, and she said, oh, what we need to do is you just need to come on a diet with me. We need to sort out your hair, and you can then, if you go on a diet, then you can wear some of my clothes. And I just took that as, okay, I'm not acceptable as I am. And yes, I was slightly overweight, but to have that experience, then it just really, I went crazy the other way. So then for many years, I just starved myself. And I did get attention, but then this made it worse, because then I thought, okay, I'm only acceptable being this unrealistically small weight. And as I got older, when I'd go through crises, it was then that I started to really pile on the weight. So when the financial crisis hit, I just moved to Dubai, and I took on a new job, and I was so scared of losing my job that every night I decided that I deserved to make myself a cake. And so then for all the time, literally for months and months and months, I'd make myself a cake, eat the whole cake, sometimes be sick, sometimes not. And then the next day I'd wake up in the morning and I'd be like, right, I'm not going to eat a cake again. And then by halfway through the day, I just tell myself I deserve it. And I'll start tomorrow, I'll change tomorrow happened. And I was just caught in this cycle of really wanting to change, hating myself, not loving myself enough to change, and feeling the guilt, eating, feeling the guilt, feeling the guilt. And my life was obsessed about food. I'd think about food all the time, whether I was on a starvation mode, whether I was on a binging mode, and sometimes I was, bulimic, and it's the worst thing in the world, because you just feel so dehydrated, and you really hate yourself. Well, for me, I really hate myself even more than the binging or the starving. So it was a long journey, and then thankfully I started really doing lots of different methods of retraining my mind, hypnotherapy, loving my body, doing some emotional body work, doing some advanced counseling, and really learn how to love myself. And this was a main thing that really transformed all of my eating. Loving myself in the way I treat myself, learning to love my body, and there's actions I can talk about that if you're interested.
Yeah.
And then also finding new ways of coping with the emotions, coping with the fear, then feelings of not feeling good enough, the stress from work, the stress from my family, so that I was dealing with that rather than using food to cope with that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people struggle with those things. Nicola, what would you say was the first thing that you did? What was that first baby step that started to shift your momentum, where you started to reclaim control over your relationship with food?
I'd say one of the first was doing regular exercise every day. Not intense exercise, but something for me. Because when I started to release the stress and the tension and the emotions from my body, so it would either be walking or swimming or yoga, I found that I was finding a new way to deal with these emotions that I had. Because before that, I'd feel stressed, I'd feel anxious, and I would just either eat through it or be thinking about planning eating around it and not actually doing anything for myself. And I found actually moving the body, you can move sort of the emotions through, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Just that emotional outlet. That's something different than, like you said, binging or withholding food. Do you remember like the first time that you felt like, wow, I'm actually in control, or that first moment when you decided to make a good decision versus a not so good decision with food?
I think the first time was when I probably had a breakdown, like really cried, and was really loving to myself, and was like, right, I need to help myself. I need to really change some things, and so I'm going to make myself a realistic plan. I'm not going to put myself into an extreme diet. And I was an all or nothing person. I think that was the main thing, where I had that breakdown and I realized the importance of not being that all or nothing, that there is a medium way to living. And you don't need to be, I'm eating all the foods today and then I'm not eating any foods tomorrow. I'm not eating any of those foods tomorrow, but just being in the middle.
Yeah, I love that concept. That's something that I talk about a lot. I refer to it as transformation light switch syndrome, where the light switch is either on or off, and we have to find that middle ground where I always recommend almost like an experimental mindset of let's, low pressure, and let's just take this one step at a time and collect data and make a little fine tuning tweaks here and there, but take that pressure off ourselves around food and around our transformation. So, Nicola, let's say, I've got a lot of listeners that deal with this weight loss battle, and there are several people that are, morbidly obese. They're in a situation where they've eaten themselves into a very unhealthy situation. So what would you say would be just a few of the initial steps, or how can we kick off the process for that sort of individual that needs to gain control over emotional eating?
So there's several tools and different things work for different people, but I would say as a start is looking at what's causing the triggers. What are the triggers behind the eating? Are you doing it after a stressful day at work? Is it that you're feeling, what are the feelings? It's sort of put down the food and feel those feelings, because until we actually know what these feelings are, these emotions are that are driving us to do things, then we can't really deal with the underlying causes. So it could be, for me, a lot of the time I was eating because I felt lonely and I felt fear, and so it was just, this is a distraction. So first of all, looking at what am I really, why am I doing this? And then once you identify that, thinking what is a healthy alternative? I think it's really hard to say to ourselves, okay, just stop doing this ritual. For me, the whole making a cake thing every night was a ritual.
Right.
It was, okay, I'm going to go and buy the ingredients, because I'd say to myself, I'm not going to do it the next day. So sometimes I'd bin the ingredients and then re-buy them. So I'd make sure I had the ingredients. And then I would go through the preparation of putting the food into the blender and turning the pot with the cake and the spoon. It was this whole ritual. So to just say to myself, right, I'm not going to do that. That was me in a unconscious way of trying to really nurture myself, but it wasn't healthy for me. In fact, it was very violent for me, because overloading yourself with sugar and flour and then being sick is the most violent thing you could probably do to yourself. So it was like, okay, what can I do? And it's like, well, I'm going to subscribe to a movie channel, or I'm going to make sure that I call a friend or see a friend, or I'm going to buy some new audiobooks and go for walks. And giving yourself lots of choices. One of the first things I say to people is, write a list of all the things you can do inside the house as an alternative, and all the things you can do outside, because sometimes we don't have the energy to go outside the house. So inside the house, it could be, well, I need to sort out all the photos of holidays you've been on, or other things, family events. I'm going to sort out the photos. Or this room I can declutter, or I can have a bath, I can give myself a massage, I can watch documentaries, I can read books. Like having loads of options. Like I can cook healthy food and freeze it into portions. Something you can do inside the house. And then have a list of things that you can do outside the house. Whether that's all the different kinds of exercise, new classes, learning things. You can also do online courses indoors as well. And so having a list of all these things, then you just ask yourself, okay, I'm not going to binge. I'm not going to overeat. What on this list could I do instead? So that's that. And then if you do break your pattern, if you do end up overeating, not saying to yourself, well, I may as well then just stuff myself because of this or because of that. Just saying to yourself, okay, I've made a mistake. I'm human. I'm going to learn from it. Maybe these foods aren't right or good for me at the moment. So until I'm in a better, perhaps, emotional state, I'm going to avoid those foods. And let me learn from this. Let me love myself anyway. It's the hardest thing in the world to love yourself when you've done the exact thing that you promised yourself you wouldn't do. But when you can do that, it changes everything. Because we didn't choose to have this. And I really believe that. It's not our fault. We didn't choose to have this. Just like alcoholics don't choose to be addicted to alcohol. People don't choose to have eating disorders. It's something that we've learned probably as a young age. It's something that we've learned as a way to cope, as a way to get through life, as a way to deal with our emotions, to deal with stress. So beating ourselves up on top of that is only going to make the problem worse, or it's going to stay the same. So when we can actually learn to love ourselves through that, then this is where we can have those amazing transformations, and we can start again fresh the next day, or even start the day again. You can start the day again anytime. Just because you maybe overate at breakfast or lunch doesn't mean that you have to continue in that cycle.
Now, along this line, I've got a question I'm really interested in getting your feedback on. With one of the strategies I have people implement when I'm working with them in a group or one-on-one basis is we use a system that I call a cheat bank, where they can have meals where they go off their game plan or they have a treat or whatever, but it's kind of thought out in advance. It's a birthday, it's a date night. Do you feel like the person who's dealing with emotional eating, I mean, is it better if they are planning that, if they are going to go off their plan, if they're going to eat a few extra calories, if it's just basically just avoiding that emotional crash and burn in the moment, oh, I'm sad and I'm going to eat. Is it better off if they are mapping that out in advance and say, oh, well, on Friday night, I'm going to take a date night and go off my plan? Or do you feel like the person that's struggling with emotional eating, do you feel like that's kind of one and the same?
No, I think that's a good strategy, definitely, and especially for those people that like planning. And for people that perhaps don't like planning, it could be, okay, you can do that perhaps one time a week without having it in a schedule. And I think that can work for a lot of people with emotional eating. However, I've learned that there are also some people that are like myself, that there are certain foods that if I eat them, they are going to cause me trouble. Yeah. Now, I don't know whether it's a physical addiction or whether it's an emotional addiction, but yet once I have that particular kind of food, I can't stop. So actually for me, sometimes saying to myself, at the moment, those foods are foods that cause me trouble. Right. And actually, there's so much other foods that I don't need them at the moment, or I don't feel the urge to have them. And I would say, definitely on your point, if you are feeling emotionally vulnerable, then to just be careful in the food choices more.
Yeah.
If you know you're feeling really low, if you know that you're feeling really stressed.
Yeah, as somebody that, I used to weigh 327 pounds. I ended up losing 100 pounds, and that kind of, started my whole transformation journey. I remember when I was that heavy, there were definitely certain foods that, like yogurt, like, you buy the little nicely packaged yogurt containers, or 6 in a package, and I would be like, well, I could eat all 6 of these easily, and that would kind of lead down that path of overeating. Pizza, same thing. Tacos, same thing. I would order like the 12 pack. I'd order the family pack at the drive up at Taco Bell, and I would eat the entire thing. So yeah, I definitely see your point there with the certain foods that are trigger foods that lead down that path of overeating.
Yeah, so it's listing that and knowing that and accepting that, and it doesn't have, it may not be forever. Some people they can change. But just at the beginning, to really help yourself, asking yourself and being honest with yourself, are there certain foods that often cause me trouble? And this is where, if we do have a slip, learning from that and being like, okay, well, maybe that food will just go on my list of I'm not sure at the moment list, or I'm just going to give myself a temporary break from. Because the mind doesn't like it if we say, well, we're not going to do this forever, and no one knows what's going to happen in the future. So just saying, like, I'm just going to put a pause on that. Thank you very much. I've learned from this experience. This food probably doesn't suit me at the moment, and then focus on the foods that do. And I know there are so many foods where I can eat them and eat them and eat them, and they won't cause me to binge. And so it's like having a safe list as well. And having a safe list when you're going through emotional times can be really powerful.
I love that idea.
About food, yeah. And the thing about food is that it's so unique, isn't it, to everyone. To everyone. Your relationship is so personal. It's finding what works for you. And that's the most important thing. Listening to your body, finding what works for you.
Yeah, and the tough thing about food is that, if we have an issue with alcohol or smoking cigarettes, we can quit those things and not consume them. But food, we have to consume food. So I know that's why a lot of people struggle. And then I love your idea of the lists of kind of the non-negotiables, the things that we put on pause for now, and the things that we can definitely use as go-to safe place foods that are healthy to nourish our body. So I think that's an amazing idea. Now, another concept that's kind of along these lines I wanted to ask your opinion of. I had a client that asked me a question that I wasn't satisfied with my ability to answer. And what she asked me was, is there a difference between emotional eating and food addiction? So what would your thoughts be on that, Nicola?
Sure, I would say, yes, there is a difference. So for emotional eating, it's more where you're eating to comfort yourself, or you're eating when you're stressed, you're eating when you're anxious, and you're or sometimes also, let me not forget this, eating to celebrate. Some people have linked food to a reward, so they're doing well at work, their partner's been really great to them, they've got something new, it's their birthday. So some people overeat because of positive things as well. So whenever we have this emotional link, we're going to just eat and eat. So this is the emotional side. But there's also food addiction. And this is where, for some people that have food addiction, it doesn't matter what their emotions are like. They can be quite emotionally neutral, let's say. But once they eat that certain food, it triggers that physical reaction, and then they can't stop. So it's kind of like it awakens a real strong physical craving. And with food addiction, if they stop that food, then they're free. So some people can just literally look at that list, eliminate the foods that are causing them trouble, and then they don't overeat, they don't have problems with their weight again. Whereas if you're an emotional eater, you may do that, and then you might find yourself binging on other foods as well, because you're eating for emotional reasons.
That's I just love hearing you say the word and then you're free. That phrase, I know, like I felt that freedom, that mindset of that pressure decreasing just by you saying that. That's feel like a lot of people struggle with even the thought of giving themselves permission to be free of an addiction. I mean, do you find that that's part of the issue? People just feel like that's a part of who they are, and they are always going to struggle with that.
It certainly can be that way because maybe they've tried in the past, and definitely extreme dieting, it's been scientifically proven that it leads to more binging, more overeating. It's one of the worst causes of obesity. And so sometimes if we get the wrong information or if we go too extreme, then we can cause ourselves to get stuck in that cycle. And then when we're in that cycle and we're thinking, I can't actually change this, and sometimes it's easier to just accept, oh, this is part of me. This is what I do. This is what my family does. This is who I am, because we're scared to fail. And so in a way it becomes an excuse. And this is where we really need to take the leap of faith, take the courage and say, well, I deserve better and it's worth trying. You know, anybody that tries is doing better than people that don't try. And we learn things each time. Every time we learn something new about ourselves, about our eating. And if you take it from a point of view of learning from it, I think you can keep going and get yourself off it in the end.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things that I learned from reading Tony Robbins' material is that he says there's no such thing as failure as long as we learn something. And that lower pressure mindset, that focus on learning, being willing to get outside of our comfort zone, but then, if the results aren't exactly what we expected, well, what can we learn from this? How can we take a piece of this and put it into our puzzle or our transformation game plan moving forward? So those are our wise words, Nicola. Now, I'm a parent, okay? I've got a 3-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. And as a parent, I want to ask you, like, what I know your issues with your relationship with food started early on. So as a parent, what should I be doing? What should we be doing to make sure that our kids are brought up in an environment where they have a healthy relationship with food?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think we can all imagine the scenario of a little girl playing out with her friends, and one of her friends upsets her. So she comes running in and sits on her granddad's lap and is crying. And her granddad says, oh, come here, don't worry, have a cookie, have some sweets, just to stop her from crying. And does the cookie help with her emotions that she's upset that her friends have made her cry? No, absolutely. But what it does do is it distracts her from the thing that she was upset about. And so I think, and we can be guilty of this in so many different ways, where we use food to treat children, we use food to fix their emotions. So I think the most loving thing we can do is to really allow children to express their emotions, to express their anger, their fears, to cry. And then once we've allowed them to cry, then if we want to give them a treat, let it ideally not be food, but if it is food, let them two not be so linked together. Because I think we often struggle because of this kind of pattern. Certainly in my household, food was a punishment or reward. It was always, if you do your homework, if you be good, then you get the sweets. Santa Claus is going to give you this. You're going to get the, it was all sort of related to food. And I've been guilty of myself. I was looking after my sister's boys, and this is before I knew any of this, and this is going back 18 years ago. And I didn't know how to make him stop crying. He was throwing a tantrum in the shop, asking for what he wanted, and I was just like, okay, if you be quiet, I will get you those sweets. So he learned, okay, if I scream, if I shout, I can get sweets. And I think these kinds of behaviours, which obviously I didn't know about then. Luckily, he's turned out amazing. My sister's son, things like that. We just need to be careful of, because it's natural to have these emotions as children. And when we're accepted for all of our emotions and we're taught healthy ways to process them, then we're going to be healthy hopefully with our eating moving into our later years.
Yeah, so that's something that my wife and I strive for, is trying to not reward or punish our kids around food. What are your thoughts? A lot of times, kids develop their opinions of, okay, I'm going to eat this thing or I'm not going to eat this thing. And I've heard different strategies around, like I interviewed a couple that said that, well, we are in charge of, providing the food. So we'll make a family dinner, but they can choose whether or not they will actually eat it. I mean, do you support strategies like that? Or when it comes down to, we put the food in front of them and they say, no, I'm not going to eat this. Well, what's a healthy way to have that conversation?
I mean, that's a difficult one, because I think everybody we're all affected by the way we were given food as children. So I've had couples in my marriage counselling saying that one person wants to leave the child to go hungry unless they eat the greens. And this is what happened in his childhood. And after a certain amount of days, they will eat the food. And then the wife will say, well, no, we can't do that. And we make each children what they like for dinner. So I think it's really finding that balance. And as long as the children are not starving themselves, but they're eating something that's healthy, and you're introducing them into a variety of things, then I think that's really the best approach. I think it's when you start to give in to children and give them the things that they really want all the time, especially if they're unhealthy. Of course, if they're healthy, then that's great. Then it's not gonna serve them. In fact, somebody I know, up until they were 35, lived on Marmite on toast and crisps, and they would go out on dates with their wife. And the wife would feel so lonely in the marriage because she would be eating all these nice foods for a meal, and he would not want to go out to the meals because he just he was allowed as a child to just stick to those plain foods. So I think it's really important to push, but not push it where it's a traumatic experience. I mean, I remember one of my most traumatic food experiences. I'd gone to Tunisia with my family, and we were given massive bowls of spaghetti bolognese, and I was so young and I just couldn't eat this adult-sized portion, and my dad and my mum forced me to eat it. And I still have, nightmares about it now, and I think that's also when I've done the sort of therapy on myself, it could be things like that, or it's come out from the therapy, that you can start to have difficult relationships with food, where you see food as an enemy or as something to punish someone with.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm pretty in my own head when it comes to my kids. Like, I really try to analyze, and I probably overanalyze the situation. But even just thinking, like, I feel like I've done that thing before. Like, you put the food out there and you expect them to eat it all. So that's a key insight. That's a good takeaway for me. To think about those little stomachs may not be able to just get it all in there. So that's an important one for me. Now, you mentioned your work with couples, and I get a lot of questions. A large transformation danger zone for a lot of people that I talk to is that their spouse, like, they're on board, they're trying to get healthy, but their spouse isn't there yet, and it almost creates a toxic environment at home. Any advice or suggestions on how to bridge that gap, or at least just keep it calm and neutral at home so that they can make progress themselves?
Yeah, it can come up a lot. So absolutely. And I think one of the first things is really to understand that the way they are reacting, let's say they're reacting by saying, why are you doing it? Or that they've got a negative approach to whatever your change in eating and healthy living is, it's probably that it's coming from fear. Often when people start to get well, they start to get healthy, it can create fear in the other person. Fear that perhaps they might lose you, fear that they're perhaps not good enough. Sometimes it can bring up their own issues because they think, well, you're dealing with this in your life and I'm not dealing with perhaps the issues in my life. So it can be sort of like putting them in a spotlight. And so what probably they're really needing is love. And so it's being kind and being loving and saying, look, I'm doing this for me and I love you, and just giving them that reassurance. And also, perhaps if you haven't already, inviting them to be part of it, inviting them to join the path if they're interested. Now, sometimes people think, well, no, I don't want to know about what you're doing, which can make it very difficult. But it's really not being codependent, and by that I mean is we have to always look after ourselves. And being codependent is where we say, I give up me in order to be loved by you. So if someone is starting to be healthy, starting to lose the weight, starting to feel good about themselves, and then their partner is complaining or making remarks, and then they stop doing what they're doing so they're loved and accepted, that's really going to hurt you in the long term. So it's being strong enough to say, I need to look after my own needs first, being loving, being reassuring to them, but not ever at the sacrifice of yourself. And eventually, often people do come round, but it may be difficult sometimes in the initial phases.
Yeah, and that's huge, man. I'm sure you see this a lot too, but so many people are out there and they're just in that pit of feeling like they are a failure, feeling like, they aren't worth the effort, especially the morbidly obese population. I see a lot of people that have just lost hope. And you've mentioned a couple of times about, loving yourself, knowing that you're worth it, being willing to invest in yourself. So I wanted to pick your brain a little bit and get some thoughts on maybe there are somebody out there, maybe there's somebody out there that is morbidly obese, that's feeling really like almost like it's impossible to love themselves. Like, how do we turn the tide there? How do we reverse that kind of momentum?
So really reversing it, there's lots of different ways. One of the ways that I like to use is I do hypnotherapy, which can help retrain our mind. If our mind is constantly on a negative default, like let's say I've had things like I'm fat, I'm ugly, nobody wants to talk to me, that kind of thing. So if we have those thoughts on a repetitive loop, and as humans we think things on a repetitive loop, sometimes having hypnotherapy or meditations where we listen to really empower ourselves and to give us self-love, this can really, really help. And it can help us getting into a more positive way of thinking. So that's one way. And I have a free self-love meditation that I give away on my website if anybody wants that, to listen to that repeatedly. The next thing really is to realize that we can change our life in any moment. All it takes is a decision. And whilst, yes, you're not going to completely change your body overnight, just that decision, enough is enough, you can change everything. So it's just getting to that point. So I guess the first thing really also as well is to ask yourself why. Why is it important to me to change? What could the benefits be? And looking at all the benefits and then really sort of motivating yourself to get to that point. That can be very helpful. And then if you feel like you can't even get there because you do hate yourself, you do feel low, then I would say being around people that love you, doing things that boost your confidence, just to get you started. Starting small, setting yourself small things to do, like I'm going to go for a 10-minute walk. I believe that it's better to do 10 minutes of something you like than an hour of something that you hate. And just being really loving to yourself in those ways, and surrounding yourself with people that that make you feel good.
So how important do you feel like community is when you're dealing with, eating disorders, emotional eating? These are things that really tend to isolate people or make them feel very isolated. So, and they may not be willing to reach out and get help from a counselor or join a therapy group. But how important do you feel like that community, that connection, that assistance really is?
I would say it's very, very important because, like you say, most addictions, they are isolating. And the more you isolate, the more your addiction gets worse. And whether you see food as an addiction or not, I know for myself, when I was really in it, I turned down so many social invitations because I wanted to binge that night on my cake, on my pizza. I just wanted to be alone and stuff myself. I turned down loads of food when I was in the eating less because I didn't want to eat things out of my control because it was a control thing for me as well, eating. And so the more we isolate, the worse our behaviors often become because no one's going to see us and we become addicted to that ritual and that pattern. So I think it's very, very important. And it's also very important to understand that we are not alone, that there is not something wrong with us. There is something wrong with the behavior. We are not fault, the behavior's at fault. We are not bad. It's the behavior that we want to change. So once we can get into that mode, and that what helps us get into that mode is connecting and interacting with other people. And for people that don't have the financial resources or don't have the confidence to reach out to anybody, there is programs like Overeaters Anonymous and other anonymous eating issues groups which can help people, where they can email and get support. They don't even have to see anyone. Or where they can join an online call and listen in. They don't even have to say anything. I would say if someone's really struggling, start there. Just listen to some motivational talks or emails from people that have gone through what you're going through.
Yeah, and just to do a shameless plug of your information, I feel like if there is anybody that's out there that's looking for just that initial foothold, Nicola's website is excellent. Her podcast is excellent. I mean, it's a great resource, and that's one of the reasons that I brought her here for you guys to learn from today. So that's if you're looking for that first step, that would be my recommendation for you. Now, Nicola, what are some other ways that people can connect with you as far as coaching and getting more information? You mentioned one of your free courses. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So I have a 5-part audio course, and you can subscribe on my website to get that. And it's basically the 3 key things to stop emotional eating and dieting. And it talks about how to love yourself, how to let go of the guilt, the negativity, and to really kickstart healthy living and moving away from all of these extreme and fad diets that can occupy our mind. Because I personally found that when I was tracking this and tracking that actually it made me worse, and I just ended up always piling on the weight back on. So you can get this free 5-part audio on my website, and you can also get the self-love meditation on my website absolutely free. You can just download it, and there you'll learn more about courses and how to contact me for any coaching. And I do offer a free 30-minute peaceful eating session that if you would like to explore more about working with me one-to-one, we can have a discussion and I can help you. And then at the end, if you're interested to learn more, I can talk you through it. But really, it's to give you the opportunity to see there are other ways of eating rather than going from this starving and binging cycle that I definitely know I was trapped in for 25 years.
Yeah, and you're somebody that's crossed that bridge, and I feel like that's not to knock somebody that has like a dietetics degree or something like that, but there's a definite difference from somebody that has the education but also has the experience and can say, I've walked that path, I've been exactly where you're at, and I can help. So again, this is just a tremendous resource. I'm so glad that we got to connect with this. Now, Nicola, I like to leave my audience in action. All right, we've given them some tips, we've given them some inspiration, we've got the wheels turning mentally on this topic. But let's say somebody's out there that is struggling with that emotional eating. What would you say would be one simple action step that person could take in the next 24 hours just to get that momentum going in the right direction?
Okay, so it's not an easy thing to do, but the best thing that they can do, I would say, is to put down the food, ask yourself, what am I really feeling here? And really sit with your emotions. Maybe journal, maybe cry, whatever comes up, because this is really the trigger. And then ask yourself, what's a different loving thing that I can do? What's a different thing that I can do for myself? Or what can I do to address this feeling? Because we need to actually start to feel our feelings to break the cycle of this emotional eating. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that's an amazing tip. Like you said, it's a simple step, but not an easy one. All right, but that's, we talked about it earlier, being willing to get outside of our comfort zone. For things to change, we have to change. For things to get better, we have to think a little bit differently. I think that's a great action step. Now, Nicola, I appreciate you coming on the show. Appreciate you taking the time. I know we're like a million time zones away from each other, so this is a connection that I greatly appreciate, and I think you've added some great knowledge and some great transformation tools for our listeners here today.
Great, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
All right, everybody. You've been inspired. You've got lots of key takeaways, I'm sure. Now it's time to get out there and own it. Every meal, every workout, every day. And I will see you on the next episode. Now that was awesome. Hey, thanks for hanging out after the episode. The after party here. Wow, Nicola just rocked that. What great value. Make sure you check out her info. Her podcast is excellent. And I know that you'll love to connect with her. So if you are fired up, if you feel like we hit one of those chords that made you feel like that spark was ignited and you're ready to take action, the first thing I want you to do is head over to the website, millionpoundmission.com, download your transformation battle plan workbook, and set up your game plan for the next 28 days. We're going to set up and identify the danger zones that might occur and action steps that will help you overcome those danger zones. We're going to set up your cheat bank. We're going to set up your exercise regimen, your nutrition regimen, and then week by week, day by day, we build momentum. This is a game changer tool, and it's free. So head on over to the website, millionpoundmission.com, download your free copy, and let's get that first big win today.